Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Daincast. This time, we have a very special game between two personal friends of mine. We have, playing for the Drunken Outlaws, a very rare and special treat for us. We have a replay from the infamous UK Protoss player, ZAiN. His opponent, in the pink, is going to be another player from the Drunken Outlaws. Apparently in this game he wasn't playing for us, but he is part of the squad. He is Chelch. Now, I'm not sure what the context for this game was. This may have been from an Epic LAN, because I know both of these players go to Epic LANs, which is a big UK LAN. ZAiN is one of the best UK players. He is one of the best UK Protoss players as well. His brother is a pro gamer known as Razorblader, so he's a very, very high-level player here. High Grandmaster Protoss player. He doesn't play as much as he used to. I think he hasn't played in a while. He's very busy with his real life stuff. But whenever he comes back to the game, he always does really well, and he always places very highly at Epic LAN as well. And Chelch is around a 5.2k Protoss player as well. So no slouch himself. Definitely a much lower rank than ZAiN would be. But still, it's PvP, and they're both very high-rated Protoss players, so they're both going to be able to execute build orders pretty cleanly, and so there's still upside potential in a game like this. It really just depends if ZAiN decides to go for a mass sentry build, which he has known to do, and if Chelch is able to make the build that he wants to do work for him. So I never really know. I don't think ZAiN would be able to get away with mass sentries against someone like Chelch, but you never know. This man is an absolute madman. He's capable of almost anything, and I would never count him out. I actually have another replay from him where he beat Serral. It might be from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's no longer supported by my StarCraft client, but there will be a YouTube video coming out of casting that game. As soon as I find a way to play that in my StarCraft client, I'll need to download an old version of the StarCraft client in order to actually play it, because it's so old, but we'll see. But that should be happening at some point in the future, and I'm looking forward to seeing that game, because ZAiN likes to joke that he has a winning record against Serral, because I think when ZAiN was playing a lot, and he was at a very high MMR, Serral was not in the dominant Serral form that he is today. So he was a little bit of an easier target, and ZAiN has a winning record against him, apparently. So ZAiN going for a nice little pylon block here at Chelch's natural, realizing that Chelch is going for the Stalker Sentry expand, and this is Chelch's favorite build, I think, in this matchup, always wanting to go for a macro build. And so ZAiN is going to be going for a fairly greedy build of his own. He's going for a very early Nexus here with a few sentries of his own. We'll have to see how many sentries he makes. Oh, he's already made 2. So I think this is going to be a mass sentry game from Chelch. So he's going to give himself every economic advantage he can. So he's building a shield battery. He's making sure he hallucinates. He wants to scout everything that's happening. And he's already got 4 sentries. And spoiler alert, he's probably only going to be making sentries from now until the end of this game, which would be quite a feat. Chelch, no slouch in the sentry department himself, going up to 3, but this is the standard 3 sentries that you make with this expand build for Protoss, so I don't think Chelch will be doing anything else. I think he'll just be staying on these 3 sentries and then adding Stalkers, Immortals, Charge Lots, and Archons from there on out. So what we should be seeing from ZAiN is a lot of shenanigans. We'll see proxy bases, we'll see drops, we'll see multitasking. We'll be seeing him leverage his exceptional mechanics and multitasking to put him into the game. A little bit of a pause shenanigans there from the 2 players, a little bit of lag, but looks like everything is back on, and Chelch is going to be going for some scouts of his own. This might reveal to him that ZAiN is going for this shenanigan sentry build. He might even scout that he's going for this 3rd base here. I think that would be great for Chelch if he were to spot this, but I don't think he's on the path to actually see it. I think he's going to scout this way, and so he's going to see what he's got in here, and the sentries are going to try to block, but I don't think it's going to be possible for the sentries to block the scout from Chelch. So Chelch actually sees the 3rd base timing. He even sees the sentry, so he's going to know basically what ZAiN is up to at this point. And Chelch is being very, very diligent with his scouting. He's got these Phoenix flying all around the map because he knows that Chelch likes to go for many, many bases all over the place to stretch his opponent's multitasking. So Chelch is going to be sticking to a fairly normal build here, going for upgrades, going for a Twilight Council, and he might be taking a 3rd base of his own here or going for an attack. We'll have to see how he decides to handle this move from ZAiN, because this kind of demands an answer. If your opponent is taking a fast third base like this, especially in PvP, you need to either attack and kill it, or you need to take a third of your own. Otherwise, your opponent's economic advantage will start to snowball and will start to bully you out of the game at some point. I mean, it's less of a big deal in a game where your opponent is making only sentries. And there is a robo from Chelch, or from ZAiN being added, but I don't think it'll be immortals from this. I think it will be warp prisms, plural, and observers, just to see where everything is. He's going to want to know where Chelch's units are. He's going to want to send sentries into all of his mineral lines. He's going to want to force field his units out. He's going to want to abuse the power of the spellcaster, even though these sentries do almost no damage. If you've got enough of them, it's kind of like the old saying, you know, in paper, scissors, rock. You know, rock beats paper if you have 1,000 rocks in one paper. And so sentries will beat a sensible army composition if you have, you know, twice as many sentries as the opponent has whatever units. It should be all right. So we'll have to see how. I mean, it's really hard with Protoss because Immortals with Templar, with Storm, Archons, things like that. It becomes really difficult to trade up against things like that. But Chelch is going for a fairly late base here, late third here, and I think he's just going to go for a very strong 2-base all-in here off of many gateways. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gateways with Archons, with Immortals. This is going to be very difficult for ZAiN to deal with, but he is scouted this, and he's going to build lots of cannons and lots of batteries. So this is going to maybe give him the DPS he needs to get this army down. All he's got is sentries. They can make hallucinations. It's going to be up to these static defenses from ZAiN to deal with this army, and there's a lot of static defenses from ZAiN. Chelch now deciding to take the third base of his own. It's going to be very, very cheeky here for ZAiN to hold this because he's got lots of sentries, but there's so much damage, there's so much meat from Chelch's army. He's got an Archon, he's got an Immortal, and he's got a fair amount of sentries himself. So, but there's just so many cannons and batteries here. I just don't see how he's going to break through this. He's got multiple pylons now backing up. I was a little worried about that single pylon, and now he's going to be funneled into a choke point with his gateway army. He doesn't have any way to get it inside of Chelch's, or inside of ZAiN's base. So this one hallucinated Colossi being sent out. A few force fields do trap these stalkers, and nice little kills from ZAiN are gonna start whittling down these units. These Colossus being sent as scouts around. So Chelch does have a warp prism with his army, so he could decide to warp in. I think if he were to warp into ZAiN's main base, this could become very dangerous. The only thing that ZAiN is really ready for here is a frontal assault from Chelch, but looks like ZAiN is going to be moving out on the army himself. So he's got the same army supply as Chelch. He's even got the same upgrades. He just has only sentries, and even though there's force fields, it's not that big of a deal because he's got Archons to break the force fields, and these Archons are going to do work on these sentries if they manage to get the distance on them. So this hallucinated Colossus being sent out to engage this is going to be focused down, obviously not doing any damage because it's fake. But ZAiN is getting a lot of scouting information here. Now taking a 4th base and a 5th base in the proxy location here. And he's going to be looking to put some more pressure onto Chelch at this point, realizing he can't do it, so he's going to cancel. So he needs to show that he's taking this base to make the Chelch less suspicious, right? So that if he doesn't see this base going down, he knows that ZAiN's taking bases. He just needs to know where they are. So Chelch is going to be scouting as diligently as he can, but as long as ZAiN is faking this base, he might be less prone to scout because he might be thinking, oh, well, I'm getting that base down. That's fine. So ZAiN is now going for another base in this location here, which is going to get spotted from Chelch. But this is, again, just going to make this one more safe because Chelch is going to think that he's scouted the proper base. And as long as this one gets some cannons up, he should be in a good position to defend it as well. The longer this game goes on, the more ZAiN's army composition starts to snowball. He's on 64 army supply, just 52 of Chelch. Chelch does have lots of bases of his own at this stage. He's making bases all over the place, but ZAiN is getting away with making an only sentry army. Even though it's a very weak army, Chelch is not able to punish this because ZAiN has so much static defenses. So now Chelch has lots of workers, lots of bases, and a better army composition, but he's still not in a winning position yet because ZAiN has got lots of bases, and he's got his army still, and he's surviving. So now ZAiN is going to be looking to do an attack of his own. He's moving out onto the map. He might catch this stalker here, doesn't even need to use a force field on it. And he's going to be dealing with this counterattack from Chelch here. So ZAiN is going to be attacking the 4th base of Chelch. Chelch is going to recall everything, realizing there's no way that I lose to this if I actually get a decent fight on here. But there's so many Colossi, it's actually really difficult for him to engage. His units are all attack moving. There's no observer with his army. And now Chelch actually loses quite a lot of his army to that, and ZAiN gets away scot-free. Meanwhile, though, the army from Chelch intercepts ZAiN's army in the middle, the rest of his army here, but now ZAiN's turned on it, and now he's going to fight as well, focusing down the Immortal, losing quite a few units are both players, but now ZAiN cleans this up with his overwhelming amount of units, and Chelch has lost a fair amount here. Chelch going down out of 46 army supply to the 70 army supply of ZAiN. ZAiN actually walking into the main base with his Warp Prism and his sentries. He is going to escape with 4 of them in the Warp Prism, and he's killing quite a bit here. He wants to focus down this Templar Archives to make it more difficult for Chelch. Probably just going to recall these sentries as soon as possible, making quite a few Colossi. Again, but I can't help but think these sentries, if they're not recalled here, they are pretty much done for. ZAiN, though, is also counterattacking at the 4th base of Chelch with his sentries here. So now we can see the multitasking of ZAiN starting to kick in, attacking Chelch in multiple places at a time. He's going to be able to get this base, and he's also attacking with the War Prism at this base. Chelch going up to Tempest now, but I don't think it matters what his army composition is if he doesn't have any mining. And since this base is looking like it's going to go down, this is actually looking pretty great for ZAiN at this stage. He's making sentries, sentries, sentries. He's got more static defenses. His mining has been untouched at this stage. He is getting intercepted by Chelch's army, but the force fields aren't doing much of anything here. ZAiN does eventually get cornered in the back here with the Archon, but they, again, have to waste so many shots on the Colossi. It's not looking great, and everything actually does get cleaned up for ZAiN here. So ZAiN going down to 14 army supply to the 57 of Chelch, showing just how weak those sentries are if you finally get a fight here. So ZAiN definitely having the worker advantage here, going up to 87 workers on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bases to the only 4 bases of Chelch. But there's more harassment happening here for ZAiN, and the Stalker Warpin is going to be prevented from doing all that much because the sentries can force field them out. So now, yes, there are Tempests out at this point, and Tempests are going to be nearly impossible for sentries to deal with. So as long as Chelch is able to hit a critical mass of sentries, it's going to be basically impossible for ZAiN to ever engage him, but it's going to be up to that multitasking of ZAiN. And as long as he's getting somewhat of a trade for these units, he's probably going to be in a decent position. But again, ZAiN has gone down now to 12 army supply to the 70 army supply of his opponent. Yes, he's taking bases all over the place, but I can't help but think this army composition is just not winnable against a Protoss of the caliber of Chelch. He's just making so many Tempests. And how do you beat these Tempests? At what point are you going to be able to kill these? They can almost one-shot these sentries at this point. He's closing the distance, and now he's just bullying these sentries out. So yes, Chelch has got a much smaller economy, but his units are more than twice as efficient as ZAiN's units. So Chelch is stabilized here, and he's managed to get this base mining as well. This base has not been touched by ZAiN's forces yet. ZAiN sending out a few sentries to tickle this down to death, and he does have lots of static defenses to keep him alive, but the army is so small for ZAiN. He doesn't have any cutting power here. He has a Warp Prism. It is floating around in the base here, but Chelch has built cannons himself to prevent these sentries from doing all that much. It takes sentries ages to kill a cannon. So now that Chelch is responding to this as it is, now that he knows it's only sentries and it's going to stay only sentries, he can play a very abusive composition here of Archons and Tempests. This is a very difficult composition for ZAiN to engage. If not impossible, to be honest, ZAiN is going to have to rely on counterattacks and multitasking if he's going to have any chance. He's not going to be able to defend against this because the sentries just can't close that distance, especially... I mean, yes, there are a million Tempests here, but he can engage these one by one. He can just kill these sentries one by one, and then he can start picking off these cannons one by one as well. But there is a counterattack here from ZAiN. He finds damage here. He finds a position to get damage. Would like to see some cannons here, knowing that this is a spot that he can attack, but more probes going down. ZAiN has killed 94 probes in this game, an absolute ton of probes, and now this army from Chelch is looking very scary, but it's going to be have to be dealt with at home as well. He's got these oracles coming in to zap down the sentries, and he's got a few sentries. He's got a few Tempests, sorry, to engage this. He is going to lose that, but not before losing so many probes. The Tempest army from Chelch is gradually picking away at this base, but I think ZAiN is just going to abandon this and move on to greener pastures. Meanwhile, ZAiN has another Warp Prism dropping into this base of Chelch's as well with a big Warp in. It's on only Stalkers here, and the Stalkers actually don't trade that well if there's that many sentries, right? With Guardian Shield, with a Warp Prism microing them in and out, and with a big Warp in here, it's not going to be too bad for him at all. Chelch is frantically trying to send in more Stalkers, but it's going to take a recall of the Tempest to scare this army away. ZAiN, in return, is going to recall his sentries as well. So ZAiN has successfully forced Chelch back onto his side of the map, which is going to keep his other bases safe, and it's going to just take too much time. Meanwhile, another attack from ZAiN at the 4th base of Chelch is going to kill quite a few probes, up to 105 probe kills at this point. ZAiN is just grinding Chelch down, and even though the army is looking good for Chelch, as it has for the last 10 minutes, it's just not going his way in the economy department. And the longer this goes on, the worse I think this is going to be for Chelch. He's just going to get ground down eventually. But the thing for ZAiN is that eventually he has to deal with this army. He has to be able to kill this army. So these sentries getting a little bit clogged up here, trying to focus down this turret. They do end up eventually getting it down, but now there's a huge army of Tempest catching up with this. They are going to corner these sentries. He actually leaves before they deal with it, so not the greatest situation, but I think he realizes he's got bigger fish to fry here, as there are more sentries in the bases of Chelch at this point. The Tempests are absolutely destroying these sentries when they get a chance to, but look at this one sentry popping into this 5th base of Chelch is going to get so many kills. He goes up to 6 kills on this single sentry. ZAiN is just good at putting sentries in every single base. He's figuring out what your army is, and he's just dropping sentries all over the place, force fielding the probes to make sure that they can't get away. And even though he's trading exceptionally poorly, if you look at the overall resources lost, ZAiN has lost 5k more resources than Chelch has. Chelch is losing worker supply, and ZAiN has so much more economy than him that the trades can go exceptionally badly as long as there is some kind of a trade going on, and eventually it might actually look okay for him. Big counterattack here from ZAiN at this 6th base location of Chelch. He is just tickling this base down, and as long as this army intercepts it, it's not going to go down. So ZAiN needs to be attacking in 2 or 3 places at once to get anything done with these sentries. He has to hope that this army is not all in one place. Would like to see a split of this army, because again, even 4 Tempest is pretty much unassailable for ZAiN at this point. But now ZAiN's taken over basically his entire side of the map. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bases, and Chelch only mining on 4 bases. Actually, only really mining off of 3 bases at this point. Not fully mining off of this one as well. So many probes going down. Chelch is down to 34 workers. He does have his +3 upgrades, but ZAiN is getting upgrades himself, and with 150 workers killed, ZAiN is slaughtering the economy of Chelch at this point. But Chelch has this terrifying armada that is moving out across the map, but at very least, it's going to take him a long time to kill all of the turrets that ZAiN has built. He has cannons and shield batteries for days. And yes, you can deal with this if you start picking them off one by one, but then as soon as you go to deal with it, ZAiN drops you with 3 different groups of sentries, right? He's got sentries here, walking by the move commanded units, and Chelch realizes this is still not the time for me to move out because there's sentries in every base. How do you deal with this? I mean, earlier on, if you knew this was coming, you could build cannons but at every base. But again, it's just not enough at this stage because he can't afford it. He's down to 250 minerals. He just can't afford building too many cannons. He needs to keep focusing on his army. And look at these sentries, even killing an Archon with the little hug there. Not what you want to see, not something you see every day, is an Archon going down to sentries. Big recall from ZAiN, realizing that he's probably done as much damage as he's going to do with these, given there's a warping in Archon there as well. So Chelch is gradually starting to whittle down this base, but he's got a Sisyphean effort here because every time he goes for a base, he kills a few cannons, loses about 20 probes, and then needs to retreat because there's too many sentries attacking his main base. So ZAiN's showing us how to make this style work, but it's just on such a level that the multitasking has to be so much better than your opponent that his army can never engage you. ZAiN is gonna finally get caught a little bit out of position here with the sentries, but with the big hallucination of Colossi here, is gonna end up escaping. And now there's a little bit of a Mexican standoff here. The Tempests are gradually picking away at these cannons, but again, this just takes time. And while this is happening, a sentry going into the natural, more sentries going into this base, killing more and more probes again. And ZAiN is just ripping apart this probe line, so this base is no longer mining. Another warp prism here from ZAiN at the third base of Chelch, and it's again just forcing everything home. So Chelch tries to get some damage done, but there's just too much of a threat of this counterattack here. I mean, could he just leave a few Archons in every base? Maybe, but then ZAiN would potentially just warp in a bunch of sentries and kill it. So yeah, it's hard to know exactly how much, especially with the power of warp-ins, because ZAiN can warp in. I mean, how many gateways does he have? He can warp in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He can warp in 13 plus sentries at any given spot whenever he wants with a warp prism. So how many units do you leave? I mean, it's very difficult to know. So now ZAiN is finally in the main base of ZAiN with not much of an answer here. Chelch is going for the furthest extended base of ZAiN, and he's got quite a scary army here. But again, it's never a question of if Chelch's army would win against ZAiN's army. It's a question of how much damage can he do before he has to retreat because of ZAiN's relentless sentry counterattacks. And it looks like he's finally just going to commit here for a while, realizing the sentries are attacking a base that's not even mining. The sentries are now also realizing this. They're going to go into this base once again. And again, nothing here preventing these from dying. There's no units here from Chelch. He's just going to be leaving his probes here completely unguarded, and they're all going to go down. So now ZAiN's killed 220 workers at this stage. And by the way, that's not all he's killed. He's killed 50 units as well. Big attack from ZAiN here coming in. He might even be able to just fight this army, realizing, actually, no, this is not the way in. So Chelch splitting his army now, leaving his Tempest attacking the frontal base and splitting the rest of his army to defend, realizing, actually, this has gone on just a little too far, guys. We need to start splitting our army here. The Tempests are more than enough to deal with these bases of ZAiN on an auto attack, as long as my army protects my economy at home. But with 232 workers killed, he's actually got Chelch down to only 23 workers across all of his bases, just being ground down to a pulp here. And with the recall here, he is going to finally have his Tempests deal with these pesky sentries. I mean, yes, Chelch has killed 181 sentries. We know that those are sentries because that's all ZAiN has made. He's killed 181 of them. But ZAiN still has 75 supply worth of them, and he's continuing to warp them in. He's still got his whole base, all of his bases built. He's still got loads of cannons. Chelch has this victory of killing this base, but more probes are going down, and actually even this base might be focused down. So an actual Nexus going down now, which is you know, very, very impressive. And this base has gone down as well. So Chelch now down to a few mining bases, and this base is being harassed as well by another warp prism. A few more probes going down, 240 now in total. So these Tempests are able to pretty much blast these warp prisms out of the sky. But with the warp prism speed, does he have warp prism speed even? But with the warp prisms all over the place, he can just make more. He obviously doesn't have anything better to spend his minerals on in this game. Look at the absolute farm of cannons at all of these bases. Any one of these, yes, you can kill it if you're Chelch. You've got enough Tempests. But the army supply now is in favor of... actually, it's still in favor of Chelch, but that's only because ZAiN has not chosen where to warp in, right? He's got lots of money. He can warp in another 26 sentries if he chooses, and he's still mining, so he's going to be able to continually produce these sentries as long as he wishes. I can only imagine how frustrated Chelch must be at this stage. It's like going for an attack, and then every single time there's a bunch of mosquitoes landing on your back, and you just have to stop your attack. You're driving a tank, but you have to keep stopping your tank to deal with the mosquito on the driver's neck. It's just so frustrating. And there's really, I mean, is there something you could do about it? Maybe, but now ZAiN is in every single base here, even getting an Archon killed here. He's attacking the main base, he's attacking the fourth base, and he's attacking with his main army here as well, finally cleaning up. Chelch once again has to pull everything back to deal with this, but even the rest of these probes, there's 13 probes here, and with these force fields, he's going to force them into a death trap and kill all of them. ZAiN is gradually whittling down all of these structures for Chelch as well, so his production is starting to be threatened. And now Chelch is only on one base. He finally just GG's out, and it's a victory for ZAiN.